phone. Well, I want to thank Roseanne for the opportunity to give this talk. In the spirit of full disclosure, you should know that Roseanne and I are married for now 25 plus years. And so when she asked me to do it, I really had no right of refusal, if you think about it. But actually, I've enjoyed preparing this. I've taken some of this talk from what I do in the professional development course, but really expanded it, and hope by the end of this talk you'll have kind of a better feel for perhaps what you want to do with your own curriculum vitae. I will tell you up front, I don't have a magic answer for you here. If you're looking for a magic answer that shows you precisely how you should do this, I don't have that for you. But I'll show you some examples and hopefully perhaps get you thinking a little bit more about what you should do with your CV in terms of how to organize it. Perhaps one main message is that you should do something. You should think about this actively in terms of how you present yourself, because I think it's important. Okay, so first just a definition here of curriculum vitae. This is from dictionary.com based on the Random House Dictionary. It's also, the curriculum vitae is also called, quote, vita, a brief, interestingly, brief biographical resume of one's career and training as prepared by a person applying for a job. It's also defined as the course of one's life or career. I didn't take much Latin when I was growing up, but the plural is curricula vitae, and many of you might have known that. So that's the actual definition. Resume, interesting, I just tried to find out what the definition of a resume was since they refer to it, and that's a brief written account of personal educational and professional qualifications and experience as that prepared by an applicant for a job. So it looks like curriculum vitae and resume in common definition is really oriented toward kind of job application type things. But frankly, for this discussion, you'll hear me more think about promotion for you in the academic realm. So the other kind of thing I just wanted to mention, I've been italicizing curriculum vitae for a number of years, and I wondered, am I supposed to do that or am I not supposed to do that? So here are the rules for whether you italicize this word or not. And this is from the Guide to Grammar. It says, if a word or phrase has become so widely used and understood that it has become part of English language, that is a foreign word, such as the French word bon voyage or the abbreviation for Latin, etc., we would not italicize it. But this is a matter of judgment. So basically, since you all have heard the term curriculum vitae, I think it's in common usage. Most people would say, no, don't italicize this word in any kind of writing that you do. Okay, so here's the history. I am not a history buff, so my investigation into the history of CVs was very brief and not deliberate. But so I just Googled history of curriculum vitae, and of course what I got was the curriculum vitae of history professors at many universities. But as you know in Google, sometimes they'll give you a timeline of when the hits are. And so I expanded the time frame and went back all the way to, I think, 1000 AD. And the earliest one that I found was listed here. This is from 1282, and it refers to some bishop somewhere in the Dean of Seville, and there was the word curriculum vitae in there. So you might argue, well, it's been there back to 1200, and it's a Latin word, so I think it's been a term that's been used for a long time. I did actually find one other thing that was here. This was found on the wall of a cave in sub-Saharan Africa. This is probably the first known CV ever found. This is how it went. It said 10,871 BC, I slaughtered my first lion, big. 10,870 BC, I was appointed the lead hunter of my tribe. 867 BC, I was reassigned to an administrative position to improve the quality of meat preparation. And then I was eaten by a big animal at the end. So this is kind of the short CV that was out there and shows actually the short lifespan of the cave dweller. But I thought it was kind of telling. Okay, so what are we trying to attempt to do with curriculum vitae? Well, we're trying to compile a record of work. We're trying to summarize a career. And I would argue really what we're trying to do is impress somebody. That's one of the main goals of CVs. And who we want to... Now, this is a slide I found when I Googled an image of CV. This came up. I don't know if you can see it very well here. But this is a building. I think it was in Germany. And I think the job market must have been very poor at that point in time, because this person blew up his CV into what looks to be about 100 by 30-foot kind of a document and actually tied it to a building hoping someone would see it. I think this is real. I see actually lines, you can't see them here, but you see lines going out from the corners. So I think this guy really tethered this. I don't know whether he got a job or not, but he clearly impressed the world, at least those in his community, with his CV. We obviously couldn't do this with an academic CV because there are obviously more than one page. So who's looking at CVs? Who's actually reading these things? Well, obviously it's potential employers. Division chiefs, department chairs, search committee members, faculty who might interview for you for a position, they get your CV. Institutions that are inviting you to speak or visit often ask for your CV so they can introduce you properly. And then promotions committees obviously look at your CV, and then the referees, and I'll talk about the referees in a minute on promotions committees, also look at your CV. And then your mother looks at your CV, and you must note that your mother is an easily impressed individual. So she's not a very good judge. So I will say, what really is this about? It's hard to see this picture with this lighting here. But this person's from a different culture. He's wearing different clothing. He's got kind of fuzzy pants on. If I came to this lecture looking like that, you would say I would be out of place. It's not the custom. It's the custom for me to wear a tie, okay? And I think that's really what CVs are about. It's about custom and culture. I think they change with time, what's appropriate to be on your CV, how much you should list, how much you shouldn't list. For instance, if you, I was doing some reading, and you may have noticed, at least not in the academic world, but in the non-academic world, on resumes, people used to put kind of a goal, a life goal, or their goal position. Well, it turns out that's out of favor now, people are saying. Now, I don't know why it's out of favor. I don't know who said it was out of favor, but it's out of favor. So what this is what CVs are, and what I'm telling you here is kind of culture and custom. Now, the other thing is that in the audience here, I actually we have a nice spectrum, frankly, of people in their careers. We have people that are early, we have people that are late, and we have people actually that probably have looked at a lot of CVs. So as we go on, I'm going to be interested in your thoughts, Tom and Jamie, about this, about when you look at CVs, what impresses you. So I am looking for some interaction as we go on. Okay, a little bit about the University of Pittsburgh Non-Tenure Promotions Committee. So I'll just give you my background. I had been on the committee up until August. I was thrown off summarily in August. No, my term expired in August. I did 3 years on the committee. And as a result of that, I frankly had the privilege, and I actually think of it as a privilege, of looking through probably, I'm guessing, 100 or so portfolios with CVs, and did much more intensive looks at probably 30 of those who were people that I was on the subcommittee to kind of judge promotion. And it was interesting to me looking at how people decided to report on what their teaching contribution was. It really was very widely, the method was very wide. There was no kind of standardized way to do it. So no one really knows what the best way to do this is one main point here. So on the University of Pittsburgh Non-Tenure Promotions Committee, frankly, the main judges of your work are a subcommittee of 3 members. The overall promotions committee has, I think, probably 20 to 30 people on it, but a subcommittee is assigned to each faculty who comes up, and there are 3 people. Now, they are 3 people that are not from your discipline. So, I'm from the Department of Medicine. I never was on a subcommittee for any Department of Medicine faculty who were coming up for promotion. So I looked at pathologists, and I looked at anesthesiologists and pediatricians and those kind of folks, okay? And I don't know their discipline that well. So that's one thing that I want you to take away from this. That subcommittee will identify potential referees for your promotion. Referees are folks that are not on the committee. They're external. They can be people from the university, but they oftentimes are from around the country. You, when you go up for promotion, will list names of potential referees. You usually give about 10 names. But the subcommittee also goes outside of your list and tries to find other people that might be able to comment on your portfolio and CV and make a recommendation whether they think you should be promoted or not. So I'd be curious, how do you think we find these referees? I mean, if you were on the promotions committee and had to figure out, I've got to find someone to judge a pathologist who's coming up for promotion, what tactics would you take? And again, you can't, in this situation, you can't go to your own university. You have to go outside your university for these referees. Yeah, that's one tactic, is you can do PubMed, and if now, of course, the medical educators usually are less published than the other folks, so you're a little bit handicapped that way. But you can look for folks that are doing similar work. Other tactics? What? Call your friends. Okay, so that is a tactic. You call your friends at another university and say, "Give me the name of a pathologist you think would be a good referee." So that's a common tactic. Okay, the other thing I did was most people are members of academic societies, and academic societies typically have leadership groups and committees, okay, and that is, and frankly, those folks' names, addresses, and phone numbers are usually kind of right there on the website. So that's another tactic you can use. So I guess the little hidden message there is that in your academic societies, you know, be a good player in those societies, because those people eventually might be part of the judges that judge your promotion. Okay, so this subcommittee that looks at your CV will summarize your work based on your portfolio. I'll describe the portfolio in a minute. And then we'll make a recommendation to the full committee. I will tell you that the way, frankly, it works is that if the subcommittee thinks there are potential problems with your promotion, and let me say this also, it's unusual that we came across faculty who were having serious problems and that we didn't think should be promoted. That was probably less than 10%. But you have to remember that there's steps before that, before you get to the School of Medicine Promotions Committee. That's your department chair or division chief who really is putting you up for promotion. And if they're doing their work well, they aren't going to put you up for promotion if they don't think you're likely to kind of get through this process. All right, so this subcommittee summarizes your portfolio and reads your portfolio with intensity. And then committee members at the meetings are once a month. Usually there's 10 faculty that we have to go through. Those folks will probably read your CV and portfolio, but probably with a lot less intensity, realistically, all right, just in terms of how much paper has to be gone through. And then the committee votes, and we go from there. I will say in the committee meetings, your discipline leaves the room. So I never voted on a medicine faculty member at all. I was asked to step out of the room. So that's really the process. So it's, again, your judges are really people that are less familiar with your kind of nature of work than you might have hoped. Okay, what's in the portfolio? There's a chair's letter. It's usually 1 to 2 pages of dense text. There's an executive summary, which is 3 pages of dense text. There's referee names and lists that you submit. Your current curriculum vitae. There's things called a research summary form and a teaching summary form. I'll show you the teaching summary form in a minute. And then you're asked to submit 3 to 5 of your best publications if you're going up for associate professor, and then 6 to 8 publications if you're going up for professor. And then at the end, there's this thing, just teaching documentation or evaluations that you can submit with this also. And I will tell you the spectrum of paper that came with teaching documentation ranged from 1 or 2 pieces of paper to literally one candidate had 1,000 pieces of paper and it was every evaluation that was ever done on this particular person, and we paged through all those. Okay, the criteria for promotion at the university is kind of listed here, and I'm listing the teaching components of scholarship that are kind of the categories of criteria. So classroom teaching, bedside and benchtop teaching, curricular design, textbook authorship, mentorship, preparation of teaching materials, invited speakers, speaking work, teaching awards, evidence that you're a consistent national panelist on some august group, and a consistent pattern of strong, favorable evaluations by students. Now Now, you might argue here, well, here's an outline about how you might organize your CV, right? Here are the headers right here. You could just use this as headers. But if you do that, I think you probably have to show something in each of those, or perhaps significant things in each of those, which is probably a stretch for most people. I mean, you really can't do it all for most of these. So this is the other criteria that's listed, and these are all on the website, the Faculty Affairs website. You can that address is up there, and you can go there and page through those documents, and it might be of interest to you. So for an associate professor, they're looking for evidence of consistent, significant contributions to the School of Medicine or department educational goals and objectives, usually greater than 5 years, and it's evidenced by letters. All right. If in the same kind of category in the professor, it's basically the same thing, but 10 to 12 years. There's not much difference there between associate professor and professor, other than just time in the role. As you move down, it changes a little bit. In the associate professor, you have to have contributions to the design, organization, and instruction of courses or clinical programs. And then when you move to the professor level, you have to have evidence of a leadership role. And what you see, frankly, if you continue to scroll down the professor column here, is the word leadership kind of pops up many more times. All right. So as an associate professor, to get promoted, your leadership roles don't nearly be as extensive as in the professor roles. And again, you can see kind of the other components that are listed there that you could look at later, or you can pull out from the website. So is there any evidence in this area? This is about the only evidence that I'll present in this talk. This is really the results of 2 studies. One was published in JAMA in 2001, and this is a general internal medicine kind of add-on to that 2 years later, which I think the summary table adds most of the information I want to convey to you. Basically, surveys were sent to Department of Medicine chairs, so this is the medicine discipline, and also to promotion committees chairs for that school of medicine. And they just asked them to kind of evaluate what's important to you in promoting people. And here are the categories. The range here of possibilities was anywhere from 1 to 7, so that's how the scale was used. And so the top rated thing was, teaching skills, and both department chairs and promotion committee chairs, again, there are about 100 in each group, rated that the most highly. Over here, this was we looked at both the whether there was agreement between the promotions committee chair and the department chair at the same school or not. Although overall they seemed to agree a lot, at one school they might differ, which would suggest that maybe there's some problems in the promotion problem at that school. So a high percentage disagreement means that there are a lot of people weren't disagreed more often about this. So overall clinical skills was important. So you have to be a good clinician to get promoted. If you coordinated training programs, that was important. Other written scholarship was important, but not the top thing. Okay, so written scholarship for clinician educators was not rated the highest thing. You had to design, implement, and evaluate educational programs. Mentoring was important. Again, we're dropping down into the mid-5s here. Overall personal qualities, interesting enough, was up there. So I guess you have to be a nice person. You can't be a jerk. You won't get promoted if you're a jerk. Your overall reputation was important. But again, I think that's a little bit different if you look at the and I don't have data on this, but I think if you look at the research side of academic areas, kind of reputation gets a little bit more higher weight in terms of regional and national reputation. Research and medical education was there, but relatively low, actually. Seemed to be relatively less valued, unfortunately, by chairs and promotions committees. And then things like coordinating clinical practices and doing clinical improvement projects, I think, was the lowest on the list. So this is what the department chairs and promotions committees seem to kind of value in this. So I'm kind of trying to get you to sit in the reader's chair a little bit when they do this. And I think this is what I do. The other senior members can tell me whether they do the same thing. But nobody reads the CV, letter by letter, word by word. It's not like reading a novel. It is really scan for relevant areas, briefly read the selective areas for detail, scan again, briefly read again, finish and move on. It's really you know, frankly, after doing this for, seeing a lot of these for 3 years, and I can do it relatively quickly, kind of targeted in the areas I want. And I don't know, Tom or Jamie, is that similar to how you kind of look at these things? And I think it's just the nature of the beast. So you have to find a way to impress, knowing that your reader is looking at it in that way. So remember that the reader often does not know you, may not know your discipline, may not know much about the University of Pittsburgh, right? Because some of the referees, you know, they won't know much about this setting, and so may be very unfamiliar really with the type of work you do. Now this, again, you can't see this here. I just Googled image the word unfamiliar, and this is a painting called Unfamiliar. You can't see it here, but I thought it was kind of interesting. Anyway, it's abstract art. I don't know what it means. But if you'd like to get to the website and take a look at it yourself, you can. So how many of you have actually read this book, Blink? Okay, a few of you have. So this is, you know, the most recent kind of pop psychology stuff that's out there. It's not really scientific, but it's a fun read, I got to admit. And it just makes the point that we as human beings make decisions very quickly on the basis of really rapid kind of impressions about things. And I would argue that's what's going on in interpretation of CVs also, that there's really a blink effect that's going on. And you've got to think about that when you're presenting your things. So here's blink factors that I thought about in terms of just overall kind of the style of how you present it. Okay, so an outdated style, you know, here is if you are doing it on a manual typewriter, all right, that's a problem, all right. And then you can get really slick too. I've seen CVs that really look very, very slick in their presentation. And here's one here that frankly somebody put it in kind of just graphical form, which I thought was really interesting, but and maybe the future. But I thought also it's kind of pretty slick. So you got to be somewhere that's just right in the middle. I will tell you, I have seen CVs like this. Not at the promotions committee, but in other settings, and people frankly applying for relatively high-level positions. Looks like they typed their CV on a manual typewriter, and it's really surprising to me. And I will tell you, I fairly quickly kind of dismissed that person as a possible applicant, thinking, boy, this person just hasn't been able to keep up. Now maybe that's an inappropriate prejudice, I don't know, but I just got to acknowledge that is there. Okay, so what is impressive? Well, evidence of excellence is impressive. Evidence of innovation to me is impressive. Evidence of leadership is impressive. Evidence that this person has a regional or national reputation is impressive. And I'll tell you, volume is impressive from a blink standpoint. I mean, a CV that's 2 pages long, that's for somebody coming up for promotion in an academic setting, you have to go, wait a minute, something seems to be funny here. On the other hand, a CV that's 30 pages long, you know, immediately you go, well, there's a lot of work that's been documented here. You have to take a careful look at it. So volume does make a difference. And so for that reason, I, you know, make sure you take the time to get credit for all the work you do in teaching. I mean, I think that's incredibly important. You may think it's a minor teaching issue, but I think you ought to take credit for it. Okay, here's the required format. This is again on the University of Pittsburgh website, and it is a required format. How many of you have seen this? Okay, so most of you have. This is the basic biographical stuff, and then when you get into the kind of the publication areas, it's pretty scripted about how you have to do this. It's really well defined, and you know, you mechanically just got to get her done the way they say it should be done, so it's pretty easy. Research also, in terms of grant support, pretty scripted on how you have to do it. It's pretty straightforward. It's not hard. There's not that much to interpret. When you get to teaching, then you get into kind of a paragraph, and it starts to get a little less defined, okay? And again, I think this just reflects a little bit of the uncertainty of the academic world about how do you measure teaching contribution, what's the best way to do that. And I'm not going to go through all these here, but it's just not, I don't think it's quite as definite, again, reflecting that uncertainty in academia. So the other thing that's out there that I think is new, and I don't know if somebody in this room might be part of this project, but Ann Thompson wanted to make sure that you saw this. This was the teaching form that's part of the portfolio, and this is a way for you to record kind of volume of teaching more than anything across various disciplines. At the top, I'll expand this in a minute, is you're teaching to medical students and graduate students, and then residency or clinical fellows, and it asks for kind of hours and overall evaluation. This is a blow-up of the medical student part of it. Again, how many average lecture hours, average PBL hours, etc., and then kind of average evaluation scores. So it's kind of a one-page blanket summary that you do some teaching. I don't think this is quite enough, in my opinion, because it's just it's more volume overall. But they're piloting that, and I think they're looking for feedback on it. There's actually an email address you can respond to about your comments about this particular instrument. So some do's and don'ts about CVs. Do adhere to your institution's format. Watch out for acronyms. Here's an acronym that might be known to you, that I was a FAST advisor between 1996 and 2000. Well, somebody from the University of California at San Francisco might view that as a FAST being an adjective, right, rather than the actual what the acronym stands for, and maybe an adjective with emphasis. I was a really FAST advisor. But obviously it means something different. So be careful about acronyms that you know and love, which no one else would understand. So this may sound obvious, but don't mislead in your CV. So, and this is the other evidence that's out there. There was a study was published in 1998 where an institution, actually a couple institutions, looked at CVs of applicants for positions in emergency medicine, internal medicine, ophthalmology, pediatrics, radiology, and surgery. And so they looked at 250 of these CVs, and they found that about 15%, 39 of those CVs, had at least one misrepresentation. For instance, of the 2,100 citations that were listed among these CVs, 56 were misrepresented, about 2.6%. Okay, they just couldn't find them. 77% of those misrepresentations were journal citations. 18 were misrepresented abstracts, and 5% said they wrote a book that they couldn't find. So to me, it's amazing that someone would choose to do this. And I'll show you how I think it can happen in citations. Now, the other thing is in citations, of 131 citations on the CV listed as, quote, in press, they looked to 1.5 years later and only found 35%. Okay, so in press, let me just talk about that in a minute, for a minute here. So this is how I think about it, and I think this is reasonable. So the term in preparation means that you're at the stage of writing. The study or the work is complete except for the writing. Certainly you might want to put that on your annual evaluation for your division chief or department chair, but I don't think it goes on your CV. All right. Submitted means the work is under review by a journal. Again, I think that should go on your annual evaluation. I don't believe it should go on your CV, and frankly the University of Pittsburgh website says it shouldn't go on your CV by their rules. Impress means you have written evidence that will be published. If you have a paper that says we'll accept this after revision, that doesn't count. Okay, that's not impress. That's still submitted. So again, if it's truly impress, you have a letter that says we've accepted this in its current form, or we'll be sending you galley proofs, then that's fine. That goes on your annual evaluation and it goes on your CV. So I think the word that gets most confused with everyone is where impress is. And I think many of you who've done publications know how even minor changes required in a manuscript occasionally result in ultimately the thing gets rejected. My personal experience is an article that I thought was accepted